BoogeyMan band coming round the bend. Is BoogeyMan band. Is BoogeyMan band.
Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends, and thanks so much for dropping by the Horror Zone channel. I hope everyone's doing well. Today's video is going to be part 2 of my Friday the 13th, the series tribute. Of course, this video I will be focusing on Season 2. Season 2 would air from fall of 1988 until spring of 1989. It was a total of 26 episodes. And they featured the returning players of Mickey, Jack, and Ryan, of course played by Roby, Chris Wiggins, and John D. LeMay. The plot is the same as Season 1. The cousins and Jack tracking down objects that were cursed by their late Uncle Louis Vondrady, who made a pact with the devil. And I had just started high school when Season 2 aired, and I was 100% into this show. I was a big fan of all three main characters. I had a big crush on Roby, who played Mickey Foster, but I also thought she was a really strong character, and that was a character that just got stronger as the series went. And of course, my favorite character is, of course, Ryan Downing, played by the amazing John D. LeMay. But I was also a fan of Chris Wiggins, the late great Chris Wiggins, who played Jack Marshak. I feel like Season 2 is a much darker season than Season 1. Season 1 had a lot of... there was like, as they sort of eased into the episodes, especially after the first two, there was a lot more comedic moments in it than this season. I feel like Season 2 dealt with darker thematic moments. There were still some funny moments in it, but it wasn't as in your face as it was in the first season. I feel like things got a lot more dramatic in this one. This season also introduced the character of Johnny Ventura, who would appear in the latter half of the season in Wedding Bell Blues and The Prisoner. And Johnny is played by Stephen Monarch, and that character would be a main player in Season 3, but that's something we'll talk about later. Just like I did in the first episode of this series, I'm just going to talk a little trivia about it, going back to this amazing source material, that being Curious Goods Behind the Scenes of Friday the 13th, the series by Elise Wax. Like I said, this is a great resource. I don't agree with everything she says. She has her own opinions about some of the characters and some of the story ideas and some of the ways that things played out, but there's not a lot of resources for this show, so I found this really helpful, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes anecdotes. There's a lot of, good interviews with the cast and the crew, and this has been really just a helpful guide in doing this series. So from here, we're going to get into the little trivia behind Season 2. And then from there, I'm going to break down my top 10 favorite episodes of the season. Like I said, there's a lot of good ones. This was actually a harder top 10 list to put together than Season 1. There's some that I left out that I really liked, but the top 10 that I have, those are the gold ones, and I've been rewatching them as I've been working on this series. So rewatching some of these, just some of them really, really hit home, and they're very dark and very disturbing, and they still impact me just as much as they did when I was 14 years old, or 14 and 15 years old watching this season. So I hope everyone enjoys this little breakdown of Season 2 of Friday the 13th, the series, and I will come back for my closing thoughts, and here we go. Jim Henshaw, Executive Story Consultant. When I got to Friday the 13th, what I discovered was you had to write differently for the personalities that were there. There were 3 very different acting styles. I think Season 1 had been a bit of a bear for them. It was a really ambitious show for the time, and I think they burned out a lot of the first season crew. When I came in, they decided they wanted to go with a change of direction, not do so much splatter stuff. They wanted to do more psychological horror. We didn't back off on the gore, but we found a lot more logic, if you can call it that, in the stories. We used to refer to it all that went on with the cursed objects as the mystic shit. We just found more ways to make the mystic shit more believable, or to base it more in character as opposed to, here's a cool way we can kill a bunch of people this week. Tom McLaughlin, director, story editor. Frank Mancuso Jr. reached out to me again and asked if I would like to do some episodes. I can't remember what came first, whether he offered me an episode to write and direct or the story editor job. They had Jim Henshaw up there, but they didn't have anyone down in Los Angeles. Frank wanted to be more hands-on, so I came aboard and basically oversaw the rewrites of certain scripts. Frank Mancuso Jr. In some ways, the LeMay Roby parts were, thankless is the wrong word, but they were the more gumshoe aspect of what we were doing. I felt like both of them worked off each other well. In a lot of episodes, we featured one or the other, some both, but I never really felt like we had to steer towards certain kinds of things. I didn't feel like they wouldn't be able to do this or she can't do that. I didn't feel limited in that way. Louise Roby, Mickey Foster. The regulars were only given one take. The co-stars were given more takes, but we were expected to land it all in one. Most of the time we did. Armand Mastroianni, director. Friday the 13th was all shot on 35mm film. They allowed us the luxury of going into overtime and stuff like that if we needed it. They wanted a quality show, and I think they got it for TV. TV was always quick and down and dirty. Get in, get out, finish it off. Louise Roby. I remember having an argument with a director. One director said the girl. He actually made the mistake of calling me the girl. The whole crew went silent. I'm just standing there watching. Rodney Charter said, "Hey mate, she just saved somebody's life last week. I wouldn't call her the girl if I was you." I said, "I'm driving the Mercedes this week." He'd said, "It's not yours, it belongs to the store." I said, "The store is mine." He threw the keys at me, didn't hand them to me. He threw them at me, so I got to drive it. I drove it quite a lot. I love the Mercedes. It was a really great car. There was one time when they gave me a walkie-talkie in the car. It was freezing cold out, and I was out of sight of any of the crew around the corner. I had to rush down the hill and just hit the sandbag so the car would end up on the bags. I thought somebody had said action, but they hadn't, so I came roaring around, headlights on. I stopped right on the sandbags, but the camera crew was gone. They ran in all different directions. Elias Zora, Rashid. I can't be sure exactly what went on behind the scenes. I know that Chris was exhausted from the 16 to 18-hour shooting days that frequently occurred. I heard a rumor that he was being tough with regard to negotiations for the next season. The rumor further suggested that my character was introduced in the final episode of Season 1 in order to show Chris that a replacement for him was readily available. I think once the negotiation with Chris was settled, they brought me back for the opening episode of Season 2, and then perhaps their intent was to have me show up from time to time. Picking a top 10 from Season 2 was tough, and I wanted to make sure I had one honorable mention that didn't crack my top 10, but is still a fantastic episode, one that is truly disturbing, and that is episode 20 of Season 2, episode 46 of the series, and that is Mesmer's Bobble, directed by Armand Mastroianni. This one dealt with a lonely man named Howard Moore who uses a cursed bauble to get close to a very popular singer, Angelica, played by the beautiful, very talented Vanity. The cursed antique was a hypnotist's crystal bauble that grants wishes after it is used to kill a hypnotized victim. This episode aired on May 6th of 1989. Growing up in the 80s, I had a huge crush on Vanity, primarily from movies like Action Jackson, The Last Dragon, 52 Pickup, and this episode of the series really disturbed me. It's a very disturbing episode, and much like some of the ones I'm going to talk about in my top 10, there's imagery in this one that just stayed with me. I identified at some points with Howard Moore because I was a young kid. I had bad skin. I wasn't the slickest when it came to talking to women. And there's a couple scenes at the beginning of the episode where he is just, picked on and kind of judged because of his looks. You really see this journey that he goes on once he gets the bauble and how it corrupts him. And it has a very unexpected ending is all I'm going to say, and it's one that even rewatching it today is still very, very it's disturbing to say the least. But it is one that didn't unfortunately crack my top 10, but it is one that I have grown a bigger appreciation for over the years. It wasn't one I really liked because of the outcome when I first saw it. Not that it was a bad episode, it just really bothered me. But it's a really brilliantly done episode that easily is one of the best of the entire series. Number 10 is going to go to Face of Evil, which is the sequel to Season 1's Vanity's Mirror. Face of Evil aired on February 11th of 1989. It was the 40th episode and the 14th of Season 2. And it was directed by William Fruitt. An aging supermodel, Tabitha Robbins uses the cursed compact to revive her career at the cost of her competition's lives. It also brought back the character of Joanne Mackey, who was Helen's sister. And what you find out is that Joanne is the one that picked up the compact. At the end of Vanity's Mirror, there is somebody seen picking up the compact as it is lost after Helen's death. And she's been keeping it safe, and what happens is the compact finds its way into Tabitha's hands, and she starts using it to sort of get rid of the competition and make herself look younger. So it's almost like the compact works for the vanity of whoever possesses it, which was a very interesting idea. I really like this episode. I don't like it as much as Vanity's Mirror. I thought Vanity's Mirror was a better story, but I really liked picking up. I was glad that they did a sequel to it and said, you know, what happened to the compact. Number 9 for me is going to be Tales I Live, Heads You Die, which was episode 4 of season 2, episode 30 of the series. And the episode Tales I Live, Heads You Die aired on October 21st of 1988. It was directed by Mark Sobel. The plot for this one, the leader of a satanic cult, Sylvan Winters, played by Colin Fox, brings powerful, long-dead magicians Carl Naft and Tyrael back to life. Together they plan to summon Satan himself to rule the world in his name. The cursed antique is the coin of Xiocles that can bring others back to life after it kills someone, leaving a ram's head branded on their forehead. This was a really, for me, as a 14-year-old watching this episode really got me, because at one point in this episode, Mickey is killed by the cursed object, and she is really killed. The acting by John LeMay and as Ryan and Chris Wiggins as Jack, after they discover that Mickey is dead, is some of the best in the series, and it really, really got me, because I didn't know if they were going to keep Mickey dead or if they were going to bring her back in some way. And of course they do revive her, but there is that moment where you're going, is this really how it's going to end with this character? And I also thought that Colin Fox did a great job as Sylvan. He's very evil. The makeup effects are great on the characters of Carl Naft and Tyrael. Really, really creepy. And it's, again, an episode where they lose the cursed object at the end, much like Vanity's Mirror. So, again, it pissed me off because I didn't like when they couldn't get the antique back. But excellent episode, one that still gets me when I watch it. Number 8 for me is going to be episode 3 of season 2, episode 29 of the series, and Now the News, directed by Bruce Pittman. It aired on October 14th of 1988. Just as an ambitious psychiatrist, Dr. Avril Carter, Kate Trotter's patients are enjoying miraculous cures, other doctors' patients are being frightened to death, literally. The cursed antique, this is a cathedrals-type radio that transmits valuable information to the owner after it frightens its listeners to death. There's some really creepy moments in this because a lot of it takes place in this asylum. While Dr. Avril Carter's patients are being cured, her colleague, Dr. Kevin Finch's patients, are going insane and killing themselves because of the radio and its effects on them. The radio was just one of my favorite antiques throughout the entire series, and there's just some really great moments, especially at the end. I thought there was kind of like a funny little ending to this one. There's some horrific moments in this episode, though. Ryan gets electrocuted at one point when he tries to scale the fence into the asylum. And then Mickey is attacked. The serial killer John Gibson in one scene that's really, really brutal. Really a brutal scene where he acts like he's going to rape and kill her. And I thought Roby did a terrific job in that scene, which was really hard to watch, especially for a fan of hers, and just that scene really bothers me. But I loved the fact that Kate Trotter came back. She played Effie Stokes in the Cult of Hathor episodes, and it was great to see her come back as a very different character. And this was a good balance between sort of dark humor and gore, and a really interesting story and a really unique antique. Number 7 for me is going to be episode 23 of season 2, episode 49 of the series, The Maestro. This one aired on May 27th of 1989. Jack's niece Grace comes to town to dance for a prestigious choreographer, Anton Pascola, played by Comfior, whose dancers seem prone to suicide and deadly accidents. The cursed antique in this one is a Victorian Symphonia music box that provides new choreographic material but kills the dancers in the process. I've always been a fan of Comfior because of his work on the Friday the 13th series. Then I would see him in shows like 24. He was also in the Stephen King adaptation, Storm of the Century. Just a huge fan of the guy, and anytime I see him in anything, I'm just really impressed by his acting abilities, and just he's such a presence. Jack's niece Grace was a family friend. He was a friend of her father's, but she treats him like an uncle. The relationship between Jack and Grace is really heartbreaking in this episode because of what eventual outcome takes place. But you really see the desperation in Jack trying to keep her away from the Anton Pascola character, but inevitably it doesn't work out for the best. I think this has one of the most heartbreaking endings of the series, and the late Chris Wiggins was such a powerhouse and such a true performer. It really just grounded the series with his fatherly wisdom and knowledge of everything that's been going on with the antiques and with Lewis. But this is one of the very few episodes where you see him truly break down, and I think it's one of the most powerful acting moments of the late great actor. A truly amazing episode, and one of the most heartbreaking. Number 6 for me is going to be episode 12 of season 2, episode 38 of the series. That is The Playhouse, directed by the great Tom McLaughlin, also written by Tom McLaughlin. Two abused children, Mike and Janine Carlson, are connected with a mysterious rash of disappearing children. The cursed antique is a playhouse that grants children a fantasy world, but they must lure other children into it as prisoners. And one of the first things I remember noticing about this episode, especially the antique, which is one of my favorite, is that it looks like the Psycho House. The Playhouse episode is one that really impacted me because I was like 14 years old when this one aired, and it dealt with, child abduction, the fears of child abduction, and living in the Bay Area. There had been several child abductions when I was a kid. The most notable ones were Kevin Collins and Amber Schwartz. When you hear Amber Alert, that is because she was kidnapped in my hometown, and right before I graduated 8th grade, which was really, really creepy. I still remember the helicopters circling, looking for her. This episode also deals with child abuse. The mother of Mike and Janine is physically and mentally and verbally abusive to these two kids. And so much so that, the Playhouse kind of gives them this fantasy world that they can live in, but at the cost of them, they have to bring it children. Mike is the one that becomes more obsessed with the powers of the Playhouse. And, once the Playhouse is becoming more demanding, Janine knows what they're doing is wrong, but Mike is kind of the protective older brother, and trying to make sure that he keeps her safe, and also that their fantasy world is not destroyed. And I think both of the kids do amazing work in it. Robert Oliveri, who plays Mike, and Lisa Jacob, who plays Janine, are both fantastic. And Robert would go on to be in Disney movies like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and the sequel, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, as well as Edward Scissorhands. And Lisa would be in movies like Mrs. Doubtfire, where she played his older daughter, and then also movies like Independence Day. The imagery of the children that are trapped by the Playhouse, it's really creepy. But it's one of those episodes that, even though it has some horrific moments, it actually ends up having a really sweet and happy ending. Which is rare for this series most of the time. Usually the endings are really a little heartbreaking, but this one actually has a really great ending. Number 5 for me is going to be Scarlet Cinema. This was episode 16 of season 2, episode 42 of the series, directed by David Winning and released on February 25th of 1989. A film student with a thing for werewolf films, Darius Pogue, uses a cursed movie camera to bring the beast to life and eventually to become a werewolf himself. Cursed Antique is a movie camera that brings film characters to life and grants wishes after the character kills 3 people. Being that the Wolfman is my favorite Universal monster, this one just spoke to me in spades. I love this episode so much. I love the way that it was shot by David Winning. It really does capture the Universal Wolfman movie. They use images from that movie because Darius Pogue is obsessed with it, and I thought that the special effects and the werewolf makeup in it was actually really, really good. You really feel for the Darius Pogue character and how he's kind of picked on by some of the other students in his class, and I just thought it was really creepy in spots. I love that the attacks are all done through the point of view of the camera. So when you're seeing them at first, how he's sort of stalking his prey. It's through the black and white camera image. I thought that was really clever. Just a great episode all around, and one of my favorites from the entire series. Number 4 is going to be Wax Magic. This was episode 7 of season 2, episode 33 of the series, directed by William Fruitt, one of my favorite directors of the series. This one aired on November 18th of 1988. Ryan gets close to a wife of a jealous wax sculptor, Alwyn Chase, while investigating a series of axe murders at a local carnival. The cursed antique in this one is a handkerchief belonging to Louis XVI that gives life to wax statues, but one must kill for the other to live. It was really great to see Angelo Rizakos come back as Alwyn Chase. Of course, he was in The Electrocutioner. He's very intimidating. And throughout the course of the episode, you start to realize why he is so protective of his wife, Marie Chase, played by Suzanne Hoffman, who played in The Baron's Bride. And she is just so sweet and such a beautiful actress, amazing eyes. And you just cannot understand why she's with Alwyn, who is such a asshole. Just his interactions with everybody that tries to help Marie, who suffers from headaches, and you learn over the course of the episode why she does. You also really love the interactions between her and John LeMay as Ryan. Their interactions are so good. They play off each other so well. This one has some truly great moments. There's this one great moment towards the end of the episode where the Lizzie Borden wax figure attacks Jack and Ryan in the store. I love the way that scene is shot and just choreographed. There's some really gruesome axe kills in this for a television series. It was really well done. And again, another heartbreaking episode, very sad ending. Mickey wasn't in this one. This was one that Roby didn't take place in. This was just Jack and Ryan. But I love this episode. I always have. And it's truly one of the best episodes of the series and still holds up to this day. Just rewatching it after having not watched it in a while really gets to me. And everybody in the cast just does a fantastic job. Number 3 for me is going to be The Sweetest Sting. This was episode 11 of season 2, episode 37 of the series, and directed by David Winning and aired on January 21st of 1989. A beekeeper, Elroy McCabe, played by Art Hindle, uses a swarm of vampiric bees to provide terminal patients with new bodies and to extort money and services from them afterwards. The cursed antique is a transport beehive which causes the bees to become vampires, able to transmit life force from one person to another by stinging. Another really intimidating character is played by Art Hindle, who a lot of people might recognize from movies like Porky's or Black Christmas. He is so creepy and so good as Elroy McCabe, just so intimidating, so well played. The actor just really hams it up in some scenes, but is really, really scary in his interactions with some of the people that are using his services, because he requires some really hefty cost to what he's doing for them. It's very much reminiscent of Scarecrow, just in terms of like the farming community and where this is taking place. And one of the focal points of this episode was on the character of Norman and Joanne. Your heart is with these characters because Norman sort of is starting the story on a low point, and he decides to use McCabe's services. And there's just this really sadness to this episode, even though you have the horror in it, the horrific moments where people are being stung to death or killed. A terrific episode, one of the best. Number 2 for me is going to be the episode A Friend to the End. This was episode 18 of season 2, episode 44 of the series. This one was directed by David Morse and aired on April 22nd of 1989. While Mickey and Ryan track down a sculptor, DeJagger, who turns her models into stone statues, Mickey's lonely nephew, JB, finds a new dangerous playmate, Ricky. The cursed antique in this one is a stone fragment called the Shard of Medusa that turns people into stone, and a child's coffin that resurrects a dead child, but the child must kill to stay alive. This one was interesting because it had 2 objects. In fact, one of them would sort of play a role briefly in season 3 where it's mentioned again, because in this one DeJagger reclaims the Shard of Medusa and escapes to Europe. But the main focal of this story was on the character of JB and Ricky. Ricky is one who was brought back to life by Satanists and wrote to Uncle Lewis about wanting a child, and he provided them with the child's coffin, but the hunger that this child requires in order to stay alive got too great for them, and he ended up killing them. So then JB sort of encounters him and becomes friends with him, but he starts using JB to get him victims. And I really like the character of JB, played by Zachary Bennett. His mom is Mickey's sister, and she just runs off with her next boyfriend. And she dumps him on Mickey and Ryan as they're in the middle of trying to track down DeJagger, who has the Shard of Medusa. And you just feel really bad for him, like nobody wants him around. And I went through that a lot, especially because, my parents were divorced and my dad I had 2 stepmoms before I was 10 years old. So I kind of went through that a little bit too as a kid, not so much with my mom at all, but my dad, it was just kind of like, it was rough. It's like, a lot of times I felt like, I was kind of just given a toy or, left with somebody so they could go party and things like that. So I really related to the JB character. And I also thought the kid that played Ricky, his name is Karam Maliki Sanchez, and I remember seeing him in Texas Chainsaw 3D. He played Kenny in that. He does a great job in this, and you really like the 2 kids bond, but you just feel Ricky was an abused kid that was killed by his father. So that's what, it's like that. There's some just really horrific moments in this that flash back to his childhood and what happened between him and his father. And then just what he becomes when the hunger hits him is really, really scary. Really creepy episode, great episode. And rewatching it recently just reminded me just how great it is. But the best episode of season 2 has to go to the episode Better Off Dead, which was episode 15 of season 2, episode 41 of the series, directed by Armand Mastroianni, and aired on February 18th of 1989. A doctor, Warren Voss, Neil Monroe, has been abducting prostitutes in order to experiment on them and find a cure for hyperviolence syndrome. Jack, Mickey, and Ryan learn that Dr. Voss is also willing to experiment on women who are not prostitutes. The cursed antique is a silver syringe that extracts part of the soul from others, allowing him to temporarily cure his daughter of her hyperviolence, but the donors become hyperviolent themselves. I think this is the most brutal episode of the entire series, and what's heartbreaking about this is that it involves a friend of Mickey's. So Camilla Scott plays Linda, and she's trying to find an apartment in town, but she's sort of staying with the cousins and Jack at the store. And one night when one of the prostitutes that Warren Voss has caught gets out of the house that he has her trapped in, she runs in front of the car that Linda and Ryan are in and causes an accident. As Ryan's trying to call for help, he's knocked unconscious by the doctor, and Linda is captured. To say that this episode affected me greatly is an understatement. Watching this as I was 14 when this aired, and it is not a happy ending at all for anybody. And Mickey goes through hell in this one. What happens to Linda is truly heartbreaking. There's just some really disturbing imagery in this. There's a couple of moments in it that reminded me of, Linda Blair's turn in The Exorcist. I thought Tara Meyer did a terrific job as Amanda in those scenes where she is hyper violent and terrifying. Yeah, this episode is heartbreaking, very violent, and very scary. I love it, and even though it's hard to watch, it is my favorite episode of season 2. So I think season 2 was really the strongest season of the series, even though I enjoyed all 3 seasons. There's some truly, truly great episodes, and I think the cast just kicks ass in this. And I was really kind of happy that they did bring in the Johnny Ventura character, because I thought it'd be kind of interesting to have somebody else come to help them acquire the antiques. And I thought, he was so different from Ryan that I thought he could, be a good, fourth player in the group from Curious Goods that are going out to get these cursed antiques. I'm not really happy with how things ended up in season 3, but that's something we'll talk about in the next video. But I'm curious if you guys are fans of this series. What did you guys think of season 2? Or did you like the picks that I brought up as my top 10 for the series for that season? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would love to hear from everyone. And thanks so much for celebrating this completely underrated television series that I grew up absolutely loving, that I wish would have gone on for more than just 3 seasons. I'm grateful that I have them, but it's really kind of a sad, how it kind of went out. And it's, again, something I'll talk about when we talk about the final season, season 3. Looking forward to doing that. Take it easy. Stay scared as always. Peace. Hey, my fellow Fright Fiends, I just want to thank everyone for supporting BoogeyMan Ben's Horror Zone. If you haven't yet subscribed and you'd like to, please hit the subscribe button down below. Click the bell notification so you're updated every time I drop a new video. I try to drop a video at least once or twice a week. The Horror Zone is a passion of mine, and it really makes me happy that I can share that passion with all of you guys. Thanks so much again for the support, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy. Stay scared as always. Peace.